Iris Martinez is clerk of the Circuit Court of Cook County. Her failures to protect the digital identities of online users have allowed multiple individuals to defraud me, and they present an ongoing threat to any unrepresented online user, which is to say, people too poor to get an attorney. In this video, I'm going to first talk about how I discovered that I had been defrauded and what errors exist in her system. Basically, when I discovered what a docket is. Then I'm going to talk about how not only my details, but the docket itself in my case has changed multiple times, which I don't believe is supposed to happen. And then third, I'm going to talk about the exhaustive efforts I've made to try to get Iris Martinez to protect online users like me. Finally, I'm going to talk about the civil rights implications of allowing identity theft and fraud against a class of litigants who are, by definition, too poor to hire an attorney. I'm a pro se litigant, which means I don't right now have an attorney. At other times I have, and in another video I talked about the downside of that when an attorney defrauded me. But basically, I access the court filing system now through a software called Odyssey File, it's a company it's Tyler Technologies based in Texas. I first created a user account, I believe in 2017 or 2018 at another time when I didn't have an attorney. And that was before COVID. So I remember when I would attempt to file things online, it asked me for a lot of money. And if I walked to the clerk, they didn't ask me for money to file things. So before COVID, I would just walk to the clerk's office because I couldn't use the online system. I discovered that actual fraud using Odyssey File had taken place in the spring of 2020, about a year later. And first of all, I noticed that the judge in my case, Robert Johnson, and a guardian ad litem named Michael Bender, they before that had seemed bizarrely biased towards my ex-husband. But then I became alarmed because they had blocked hearing on motions that showed that my ex-husband has 3 businesses and multiple bank accounts overseas, which he does not report. And specifically, the intention seemed to be to hide his money laundering, which that's a very serious act. So I didn't think a judge and guardian ad litem would want to stay aligned with somebody like my ex-husband unless there was something bad about them. It's kind of a simple gut feeling. So because of that, I reached out to the pastor at my church because my church is very focused on social justice and said I believed that I needed a civil rights attorney. I think I was right at that time, but he did refer me to a couple congregants who were attorneys, and they just mansplained that I just needed a good divorce attorney and it would all be taken care of. So they referred me to a couple women, both of whom ended up saying they wouldn't take my case because I had problems with Michael Bender. But one of them said that she was going to go to the clerk to pull my docket. And I asked her what that meant. And she said, well, I can go to the clerk and print out all the activity in your case. And so then I realized I could do the same thing. And I did that. And I also soon was able to find that I could access the docket online. And I still have a PDF of the full docket that I created on June 8th, 2021. And I mention that because it's not the docket that you'll find today, which you wouldn't expect. I wouldn't expect that change. I didn't think much about what a clerk does, but if you would ask me, I would have thought probably they're supposed to make sure that the records stay accurate and there's not forgery and identity theft. I would have thought that was what the clerk is for. So when I started to look at the docket, I was at the courthouse and I noticed, right away, I noticed a couple irregularities that I went to the employee working at the clerk's office. It gets confusing because Iris Martinez is the clerk, but then you kind of call the employees of the clerk. So when I say clerk, I'm talking about an employee of Iris Martinez. I'm not chatting with her personally. So I noticed a couple of things while I was in the office. First, I noticed that there were 3 entries where postcard returned, addressee not found, sent to me. And I printed out those entries. And on 3 different occasions, the court mailed notice to an address 423 Linda Avenue, Chicago, the zip code 68091. And my address for the 4 years before that, so 2016 to 2020, had been 423 Linden Avenue, Wilmette, 60091. And this, it was more than a mix-up, because at that same time, the attorney was hiding from me that I was being sued, so I didn't receive notices from the court. And I remembered that when Brad Trowbridge resigned, he said that the court was having all these computer problems. He's the only person who's ever said that, but he said it, I think, on at least 2 occasions. So first of all, I said to this clerk, well, was there a known bug that changed the addresses? And she said, no, you changed it. And I said, I did not change it. And she said, well, you logged in with your email and changed it. And I said, I did not log in with my email and changed it. And I said, what was my email that changed it? And what IP address? Remember, this is spring of 2020, so people didn't jump around as much from computer to computer. She wouldn't tell me my email. She wouldn't tell me my IP address. And I told her I have my ID for being me. It's a who's on first thing. But anyway, at that time, she would not tell me. I called Tyler Technologies later and asked what email and IP address I used to make those changes, and Tyler Technologies would also not tell me. So I noticed that irregularity, and I also noticed that on July 21, 2020, Judge Robert Johnson or his clerk, Kay Mason, I think they can both probably enter orders from Judge Johnson, ordered an appearance. And I said, well, what does that mean? She said, you said you wanted to appear pro se. And I said, I did not. And at that time, I hadn't been in court. And again, I was kind of led to believe that someone using my email logged in and made the entry. And she said normally there would be a motion for an appearance. There was nothing, according to this version filed. Since I learned what a docket is, like I said, it's changed. So on my website, contemptuouswoman.org, you can download the June 8th, 2021 version of the docket, which I think is most accurate. But I kept logging in and looking at the docket and just noticing changes. So in February of 2022, normally an entry, as you see in the June 2021, like if I file a motion, participant would be Megan Mason, or it'd be my married name, Megan Matt. And instead, every entry in the docket was changed to Peter Matt. And that's in the version that I looked at on February 2022. In April of 2022, I noticed a really weird change on the docket. So on multiple occasions where Brad Trowbridge had been my attorney, and it was in, so he was my attorney between July 2019 and October 2020. Every entry during that time should have had, for me, the attorney Bradley Trowbridge. I did not meet anyone from Merrill Law until July 2021. But I noticed multiple entries listed Jonathan Merrill Law as the attorney a year before I met anyone from Jonathan Merrill Law. So that was strange. And then today, if you log in, all of the participants have been removed, except, so if you go back, you can see some of my attorneys, but notably Bradley Trowbridge has been removed. And in another video, I have stated that my fear and my suspicion is that Bradley Trowbridge defrauded me in order to become a judge. It sounds grandiose, but that's honestly the only thing I could come up with. If you have another idea for why you defrauded me, I'm happy to hear it. But I've also, in 2021, when I started noticing the fraud, I did test the system. I want to be clear that I haven't ever now or in the past entered in fraudulent information in a court software. That would be wrong. But I did test to see if I could create a fake email and change my address. And I was able to claim that I was Megan Mason by the security that Iris Martinez has is you give them whatever email you want, say fraud@makingshitup.com, and then it sends a confirmation at fraud@makingshitup.com, and then you click that and say, I, Fraudy McFrauderson, am Megan Mason because I told you so. That's the security feature. So, which is to say there's no security feature, which is really a problem when your identity gets stolen. I wouldn't be worrying about this just for the sake of complaining about software if my identity hadn't actually been stolen. I've made really exhaustive efforts to try to get access to my full digital identity at the court, to explain all of the errors in the docket, to get electronic service from the court, because I was able to create a secondary login, but the primary respondent, it's an email that I don't have access to, and I don't get electronic. So if somebody files something, I don't get a copy unless I've filed it. So, my efforts included going to speak to a supervisor around February 9, 2022. I went to the office of the clerk and I asked, and I had sent email after email before that. And I believe before that, I'd probably written my first paper letter to Iris Martinez because you can't email her. So I went to the clerk's office and asked to speak to the person in charge of IT because I said my identity had been stolen. And a woman named Lori Garner came out and said that she was a supervisor and she could help me. And I explained to Lori Garner, I said that I believe, my attorney had filed fraudulent things the year before. And that I believed that he used a fake email to go in and change my mailing address from 423 Linden Avenue to 423 Linda. And her response was really weird because she kind of raised her eyebrow and she said, well, how do you know that he did it? And at that point, that was what her employee told me. It really doesn't matter to me who Fraudy McFrauderson is. I just want my email back and my digital identity. So she took my name and number and said that somebody would get in touch with me. And nobody ever got in touch with me. And this is where it gets kind of weird because then it was either that night or the next day. I logged in to Odyssey File and I noticed, so that the mailing address previously had been my last attorney of record, which had been Merrill Law, which I mentioned before. And I noticed it said that my attorney was Merrill Law, and then the address for Merrill Law was 423 Linda Avenue. It's like somebody had gone in there and changed it, which was weird. And I mean, the only thing I can think is maybe somebody thought this would make it look like a bug or something, or I don't know. So then I emailed my attorney and asked if she could change it. And she said, that wasn't me, someone from the court has to do it. So, and I again wrote to Iris Martinez. And then the clerk actually has an inspector general. So I wrote to Inspector General James Murphy Aguilu, who I guess his job is to inspect the clerk, I guess. So, and then on March 29th, 2022, Sean Hanen, Deputy Chief Office of the Inspector General, so there's more than one person working there, wrote to tell me that he'd open a case number. And nobody ever followed up. And I also tried to sue Iris Martinez in federal court seeking an injunction just to make her fix my contact information and provide to me a record of digital activity that I supposedly committed. But, it's actually harder than you might think to sue someone in federal court. As of 2 weeks ago, it still wasn't fixed. On February 3rd, I printed out I took a screenshot and it was 423 Linda Avenue. But since that time, somebody did fix the mailing address portion, but I still don't get electronic notice from the court, and it still lists attorneys that are not working for me in the contact. So I think if a clerk has a job, it's to protect digital identity and to make sure records don't change. And I think Iris Martinez should do her job. And this has serious implications, I believe, for civil rights, because by definition, pro se users are typically people who can't afford attorneys. That's going to be disproportionately people of color and disproportionately English language learners. So, and in my case, when there are bad actors, they can exploit these security failures to do real harm to people. I'm not sure what Iris Martinez thinks her job is, but I think her job should be protecting the citizens of Cook County who use the court, and I wish she would do it.